I'm not ashamed.
Why was Jesus rejected in his hometown of Nazareth? This is the question that we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of Matthew on walking through the Bible.
His word, the glory of his cross.
If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to Matthew chapter 13. We're going to be reading from verses 53 to 58. If you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So, Matthew chapter 13, beginning at verse 53. Now it came to pass when Jesus had finished these parables that he departed from there. When he had come to his own country, he taught them in their synagogue, so that they were astonished and said, Where did this man get this wisdom and these mighty works? Is this not the carpenter's son? Is not his mother called Mary, and his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? And his sisters, are they not all with us? Where did this man get all these things? So they were offended at him. But Jesus said to them, A prophet is not without honor except in his own country and in his own house. Now he did not do many mighty works there because of their unbelief. So far in this chapter, we have been looking at 7 parables taught by Jesus. 4 of these parables were taught to the crowds, while the final 3 were taught in private to his disciples. Once he finished the parables that we have recorded here in chapter 13, Matthew tells us that he had departed from there and came into his own country. Now, technically, Jesus had been in his own country all the way throughout chapter 13 because his parables began to be taught near the Sea of Galilee, and Jesus was, of course, a Galilean. However, in this case, his own country would mean the area surrounding Nazareth, the specific town where Jesus grew up. How do we know this? Because of the familiarity that the people who listened to Jesus had concerning his family. Those who were in Capernaum wouldn't have had such an intimate knowledge, so it can be concluded that we're in Nazareth here. Chronologically, this story would fit into the end of chapter 9, with many of the events of chapters 11, 12, and 13 occurring concurrently with the events of chapter 8 and 9. Again, we must realize that Matthew is not giving us a chronology, but is presenting us with different themes or sections of Jesus' ministry that fit together as a unit. In today's reading, then, we have Jesus coming to Nazareth and going to teach them in the synagogue. In Mark 6, which is the parallel account, we find that this is done on the Sabbath day. Such would certainly make sense because many of the Jews would be found in the synagogues on the Sabbath, worshiping God and reading the Old Testament scriptures. While in the synagogue, he taught them. This would not be unusual, for in Acts 13:15 we find that it is most likely common practice that after the scriptures were read, the floor would be open for those Jews in attendance to be able to speak words of exhortation. What he specifically preached on is left unsaid by Matthew and Mark, but we can easily assume that it was the same message about the coming kingdom that we read of Jesus preaching to the people in other places. Jesus' preaching astonished the people, not because they believed the message, but because the message was preached to them by Jesus. After all, Jesus was not a trained rabbi. He was a carpenter and the son of a carpenter. He did not come from a wealthy or powerful family. His mother is Mary. His brothers are James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas, and he had some unnamed sisters too. In other words, they disbelieved the message not because the message was hard to understand, or even because the message was so outrageous to ever be believed. No, they disbelieved the message and stumbled over it because Jesus, a simple carpenter's son, delivered it instead of some wise teacher of the law. Jesus responded that a prophet was not without honor except in his own country and in his own house. Although this statement may not universally be true, it is usually true, and it was in the case of Jesus, for he had gone all throughout Galilee preaching, teaching, and performing miracles, and crowds of people came to hear him, and some believed. Yet here in Nazareth, a people who should have had an advantage because they actually knew who Jesus was and would therefore not have to wonder if they could trust him or not, this people rejected Jesus because they knew who he was. The same thing can happen today. When congregations are looking for preachers, they may be reluctant to choose someone who had grown up from among them, instead choosing someone with a better reputation or more experience. Now, I'm not saying that all such choices are wrong, but they do illustrate the principle that Jesus is teaching, which is that oftentimes preachers and teachers get more respect by those who didn't know them growing up than from those who did, even if the message that both people taught was the same. The people of Nazareth disbelieved the message of Jesus, which is why Jesus didn't do many miracles among them. Remember, Jesus' miracles weren't for show. They were to cause belief. The people of Nazareth had hardened their hearts to Jesus, so there were A, fewer people who came to Jesus for a miracle, and B, fewer reasons for Jesus to perform a miracle, for this people wasn't going to believe. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of Matthew 14, verses 1 to 12, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time.
I'm not ashamed.
Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.
Of his cross.